Today, we're speaking with Applonia Cornolius. She's an account executive at Slack, and her story is so interesting. You're going to hear how she moved on from a very successful career in health and science and gave it all up in pursuit of happiness and started again at the bottom rung as a BDR at a tech startup. She's had incredible success, and you're going to enjoy her journey. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Seller's Journey, the podcast where we speak to great sales reps and leaders and share their real stories from start to sales success.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Fung, and today we're chatting with Applonia Cornolius. Applonia, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for asking, Joseph. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Me too.
So your journey starts in health and science, and would love to understand, what you studied. I understand you did your master's. You've had, fantastic success. I mean, launching a not-for-profit as well. What's the beginning there? What's the science background that we can share with our audience?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Toronto, and I went to school at the University of Toronto. I double majored in molecular biology and biotechnology. While I was, a university student, I launched a not-for-profit for underprivileged communities in Toronto, an after-school program for kids to get them engaged in science. If you were to talk to 20-something-year-old Apple, she would say, I love science. Science is amazing. It's the future. And I still believe those things. I think back then I was definitely a huge advocate for science education. I still am. The nonprofit that I launched years ago is still going strong these days. And I couldn't be prouder of the work that I did and the work that it's doing today. So after I finished my undergrad, I went on to do my master's in biomedical sciences, specifically in oral microbiology, so biofilm formation and disruption in bacteria. Super fun stuff. And I absolutely loved teaching as well over at Rutgers University in New Jersey.
So I got to get this right. You're teaching science. You did your master's, and I mean, your master's thesis sounds so daunting. Isolating antimicrobial and antibiofilm I don't even know where to start. But and then you went on. Your first role was in science and health with the University Health Network, right?
Yep. And then I worked for a while over there. I absolutely love the team over at UHN and the work that they're doing. So I led a team of students over there. What we did there was we worked on a therapeutic for chronic hepatitis, and it was great work. But I was extremely bored and extremely unhappy during that period.
So let's dig into that a bit. I mean, it sounds in so many ways that you're kind of hitting your plan, the undergrad, the master's, you're in this career, but you mentioned earlier that you wanted to pursue happiness. What were you experiencing? And you mentioned being unhappy working in the health and sciences. What was going on?
Yeah. Yeah, on the surface, of course, my parents were extremely happy during this time.
Of course, yeah.
My parents are immigrants from India, and of course, like most Indian parents, I was their golden child, as my brothers would say, and I would go to work and do well at work. I loved my coworkers, but I just absolutely dreaded going to the lab. I didn't like being so isolated, even though, yes, we had a team. Lab work, anyone can tell you, can be very isolating and can be very, very repetitive. And the work, even though we were making strides, it would take years before a therapeutic, would come to fruition. So it was a tough time. I was just so unhappy, and I knew, the next step would be a PhD, and I knew I did not want to do that. I knew I did not want to invest in a PhD if I wasn't happy doing lab work. Um, yeah.
So you're kind of looking down this, this kind of fork in the road. You've got on the one direction a PhD doing something you're unhappy, and in this other direction, the unknown. You spoke about taking some time off to figure out what that other path held for you. What was that like? What did you do?
Yeah, I was smart with my finances, so I definitely
Hmm.
saved during my time over at UHN, and I knew I would need some time to, well, one, network, and
Hmm.
two, figure out what the next thing is. Because if it's not science, what is it? Um,
Hmm.
and the one funny thing is that one of my mentors over at UHN, he's brilliant, and he's been there for many years, and he told me, you know what, Apple, you have such a bright personality. You should definitely think about something in business. And the thing about scientists is that none of us really know what business means. He kept saying business to me, and I said, I don't know what that means, sir, but Doc, I will get back to you on what that is.
Have you gotten back to him yet? Have you figured it out? I'm still uncertain.
He is he's living vicariously through me, so
There you go.
he's very excited of where my journey has landed. But at the same time, I told him it wasn't easy, but to him, he's like, oh, you're fine, I told you, business. Um so to answer your question, during that period, that time off, I really leveraged LinkedIn. I looked at a lot of different roles. I saw, the big guys: Microsoft, Amazon, Netflix, Google. I saw, a lot of programming roles, and I had to really reflect on: do I really want to become a programmer?
Mm.
Because technology was interesting to me, but I also knew that I would have to invest in school again.
Mhm.
and uh, and that was something that I wasn't truly passionate about after speaking to a few developers in Toronto.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you did mention that you were attending some events and networking some events, and that you mentioned the meetup specifically with TechTo. Can you share a little bit about kind of those events and how they impacted your journey?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely love TechTO because um, first off, the community there is amazing, and they truly highlight the talent in Toronto, um, and specifically for startups. A lot of startups, they attend TechTO, and they're always looking for talent. So when I went to my first TechTO years ago, I actually went on a lunch break from work, because I was curious. I was inoculating something in the lab, and typically TechTOs are usually in the evening, 6 to 8,
Hmm.
and I actually took a break, went down there, was like, what's this? And I absolutely loved the demo that was taking place at the TechTO event.
Oh,
I
nice.
watched someone present, and I started talking to people, afterwards at the networking
Hmm.
event. And I said, oh, so what do you do? Completely, bushy eyed, bright eyed. Like I had no idea what was happening. And some of them had said to me, oh, we have a customer support role. Would you be interested? And I said, I don't know. And I started really doing some research on what CS is, what marketing looks like,
Hmm.
what sales is, and what it would mean to join the engineering team.
This is great. So you're getting all of the job titles, all the terms. You're figuring out the business thing. Um,
Yes.
you landed a great role to start with, but it was at the entry level. Can you share a little bit about how you landed that role and what it was like when you started?
Yeah, for sure. So it was at a TechTO event. Actually, there was a female sales rep from a company called
Mm.
Trade Gecko. She had put her Twitter handle on one of the screens and said, "Oh, tweet me if you're interested in this role. We're hiring aggressively at Trade Gecko."
Do you remember
So,
who that was by any chance?
I don't remember her name. Oh, I should remember her name, but
We'll
I
find
don't
out and
remember
let
her
her
name.
know because she had quite
Yes.
the impact on you.
She did. She did. So here's the thing. I was hired, and then she left about a
Oh
week after. to pursue another role. So this is
Of
part of the
course.
reason why I can't remember her name, but she was incredible because, she, made it clear, hey, we're hiring. Don't worry about it. If you don't have any experience, we will train you.
Hmm.
And she, well, first off, she forced me to create a Twitter because I did not have a Twitter. So I created a Twitter. I DM'd her on Twitter and said, hey, I'm interested. I don't have sales experience, but I promise you I'll work really hard and I'll try and learn as much as I can. And she, fast forward one interview and a quick background check, and I was working at Trade Gecko.
Wow. Now you mentioned that when you started, it was a struggle. Can you share a little bit about that for our audience?
Yes, and I just remembered her name. Her name is Brianna.
Oh, there you go. There you
Brianna.
go.
Um,
Well,
yes,
Brianna, if you're listening, you had quite the impact on Apple. Way to go.
yes. I'm sure. You know what? I did run into her when I worked at Hi Mama. But in any case, um, when I first started at Trade Gecko, I was completely terrible. Meaning, I sounded like a robot on the phone.
Oh no.
I was very awkward. I wasn't myself.
Hmm.
Joseph, you can probably tell within the 30 seconds we've spoken that it's pretty easy to talk to me. But for some reason, when I got on the phone at first, I was so nervous. I was shaky. And when the business owner would ask, where are you calling from? I think one of my calls back then said I was calling from Gecko Trade. I was that nervous.
But you've clearly overcome it because you advanced and took on new roles. What changed?
Oh my goodness. I took a lot of feedback
Hmm.
when I first started at Trade Gecko, and one thing that led to me doing so great with outbound sales was I see sales as a craft. So every day I had a notebook. I would write down what I did well for the day and what was complete garbage. And I
Hmm.
really leaned on the feedback not only from my sales manager but from my teammates. I'd ask them, "Hey, what do you think?" And I would write down things that they would suggest and then implement it in the next call or the next day.
Now, I love how you mentioned your teammates because you also told me a story about making a close friend when you first started at Trade Gecko.
Yes. So this is a shout out to Martin. So Martin and I, we started the same day at Trade Gecko as BDRs, and he and I have grown substantially since then. We've kept in touch. He was devastated when I was actually poached for another startup in
Oh,
Toronto. He was devastated. He was like, "No!" And then I asked him, "Just come with me," and he stayed. So he
well, there you go.
he and I have kept in touch, and we talk sales here and there. And I joke with Martin because he is significantly younger than I am. I joke with him that we probably wouldn't be friends if we hadn't had met through work. But yeah,
We laugh, but that's an interesting point that you bring up. I mean, you had a very successful career and then started again, and that can be a daunting thing, especially when there's an age or a kind of time in life difference. Can you share a bit? What was that like, and how did you manage or cope with that?
yeah, that initially it was very very tough.
Hmm.
But how I saw it was I kept reminding myself as to why I am doing this in the first place.
Hmm.
I wasn't happy doing what I was doing before, and I did all the right things that everyone talks about. You go to school, you study hard, you
Hmm.
put in your time, and I wasn't happy. And figuring out what actually makes me happy, what type of environment makes me happy, and what type of career that I would want, is what really pushed me through the tough times when I wasn't doing so great as a sales rep. Um, and even though there was an age gap, I I truly appreciated their perspective because they were just completely in love with sales, and that always was encouraging for me, was having coworkers that were just so passionate about sales and so passionate about getting better at their craft.
You've used that phrase a couple of times, craft and continuous improvement, and I'd love to double down on that because you also shared when you stepped into your first account executive role
Mhm.
that was a whole new batch of struggles.
Oh, yes.
Can you share a bit about that? And how did you overcome that to excel at the craft?
So speaking of batch, yeah, you're gonna laugh at this, but when I started at Hi Mama, I'm already making you laugh. When I started at Hi Mama, um, I actually started with three other reps,
Mhm.
and we formed a rap group. Actually, um,
You're right, I am. That's great.
um, so we formed this rap group, and we actually have a video that we made and shared at one of our stand-ups over at Hi Mama,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it it was it was a funny and crazy time, and so I do keep in mind these other reps were younger than I was as well, but I learned so much from them, and we have a great bond, and we grew together. And so when we were all kind of we call it graduation at Hi Mom. We all graduated from
Hmm.
BDR to an account executive. We all kind of hit the wall at the same time,
Hmm.
and so I didn't feel alone. And so part of the reason why I was able to get through that was just talking through, okay, how do we pitch better? We know how to set up the meeting, but how do we actually close? So having those conversations was great to have with colleagues, and of course with my sales manager, who was amazing at the time. Um, but I think it's important to lean on your teammates when you're going through a rough time at work.
Wow. So there's some incredible stories of kind of challenges and that move from science and health to business and sales. Uh,
Yes.
Thinking a little bit about these, I know I promised we wouldn't keep you too long. Uh, I'd love to kind of cap off with a couple of questions, if it's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, you've been on this great journey and you've accomplished a lot, and you spoke about chasing happiness. What's the future hold for you? What do you still hope to accomplish? And yeah, you spoke about what it was like looking back at the 20-something-year-old Apple. If you cast your eyes forward another 10 years, to Apple of the future,
Mhm.
what do you want to congratulate her for doing?
Oh, for choosing happiness, for growing exponentially in your sales career, and for being able to, help the next generation land those sales roles, um, for helping so many sales reps with their career.
Love it. Do you have time for a couple of rapid fire questions
For
before
sh-
we wrap up?
yeah, for sure.
Nice. Okay. Tools. What's been your favorite sales tool?
100% the telephone.
Nice. Solid, reliable. I love it.
Yes.
Outside of work, movies. What's your favorite movie?
Okay, huge nerd here. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King.
Perfect. That's definitely one of my favorites. The entire series.
Right?
I don't know if I could pick one though. I mean, it
Oh,
fits together so well.
it does. It does. You're right.
Okay, last one. I mean, we started in science, we've gotten into sales, but when you were a kid, what did you want to grow up to be?
Well, a scientist, and I did it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. Apple, thank you so much for sharing your journey. This has been such a delightful conversation.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Joseph.
I'm glad that we could share your story, and I'm really looking forward to kind of your next adventures and seeing where you head.
For sure. Thanks.
Awesome. We'll chat soon. Hope you have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.